And we wanted to thank everyone for joining us for another installment of Chief Putney's Straight Talk. For those of you familiar with this segment, these are these kind of third rail topics, issues that a lot of people are running from. We run square into the middle of, and probably no more of an important topic than one of the ones we're going to discuss today, and that's the topic of police and race relations here in our city. I've got to my left here someone who's been pretty outspoken when it comes to those areas of discussion, and Councilmember Lawana Mayfield represents the 3rd District here, elected in 2011, has taken a number of leadership roles with the city on committees, and wanted to thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited. Absolutely.
And we've got Chief Putney, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and we're going to discuss some things that have developed over the last several months. More importantly, where we're going to be going in the next couple of months with some engagement that really we're hoping is going to get some traction in the community and move the needle. It's called Bridging the Difference, and you're going to learn a lot more about that as the program develops. Miss Mayfield, outspoken, certainly never been accused of sitting on your hands and not speaking your mind, right?
Exactly.
This past spring, you were thrust right into the middle of all of it with some comments that you made concerning police and race relations. Don't want to take you out of context, and forgive me if I'm mistaken. It was a tweet that went out in spring that said, being black in America under 45, President Trump is, who I'm sure you were referencing there, has created homegrown terrorists wearing blue uniforms, and you hashtagged it, "A reckoning is coming."
Yes.
What in the world were you thinking?
Oh, I was responding to not only my pain, but the pain across the nation. So there was in Sacramento, unfortunately, another shooting of a unarmed African-American male. And at the press conference, the grandmother was crying and asking, why couldn't they have shot him in the leg? Why couldn't they have shot him in the arm? Why couldn't they have tased them? Why didn't they release the dogs? Anything but ending in the death of her grandchild. So my comments was actually forwarding a tweet and sharing my pain and my anger as a black female that grew up reading about the civil rights movement and seeing us become a nation that's going right back to a time that we really thought we had gotten past, especially as African Americans and or blacks in America.
Not exactly the way that those comments landed, though.
Of course not.
How did they land? What were some of the feedback? What was some of the feedback that you got?
What? It's interesting. There was feedback on both sides. I really, honestly, was disappointed in how the media took and ran and tried to label it as all. So, which is why I'm glad that I'm here, because one, I need people to know that I love my chief. I have always loved my chief. I loved my previous chief. I am one of the biggest supporters. And as a black female, I'm never going to throw black men under the bus because my chief steps into a difficult role. But I also recognize the three of us have a relationship from many years of work in the community with law enforcement. But there's a conversation where what I said on a specific incident and the fact that we're having repeated specific incidences became a all. And nowhere in my comments did I ever say all, because I don't think all. But I do think we need to change the conversation regarding law enforcement, and that triggered me to look at creating some community conversations around let's get to the core of this. But I also realized recently that it's not a conversation about training, because law enforcement is trained. Because if we just run the numbers side by side, and not specifically looking at Charlotte, looking across the nation, including Charlotte-Mecklenburg, you can see where there have been a higher number of incidences with law enforcement, regardless of that individual's ethnicity or background, when they interact with African Americans specifically, that ends in that result ending is death and or assault, more likely than if it is a Caucasian, whether they have a weapon, don't have a weapon, actually fight back or attempt to escape. And when you see that daily on the news, it was heartbreaking. And I shared my heartbreak with the community.
Chief, it certainly got the organization's attention, got your attention, those remarks. Your thoughts?
Sure. Look, that's why we're here, because I told you I'm one of the most conflicted people in the country, I think, trying to balance both worlds. And I feel the pain, too. I spoke to it. I spoke to it back in like mid-2015 initially, around some shootings that were happening, especially those of unarmed people. I just think that the comment when it was made, though, I just perceived it at the initial, and here's what's crazy, it came out months later, but it still hit me as hard as if I had just read it and it popped on my phone. And I was responding too, and it's pretty well documented that I respond. You know, this old dog bites back sometimes. And what I want to do, though, is look at, first of all, what the message was, the proper context, and then how we move forward, because we can stay there. We could stay in the March and May and June timeframe if we want to, but we're not really helping our city if we do that. So I'm glad we could get together and have this conversation. But what I say is this is just the beginning of it. What we're trying to do November 15th and moving forward, what Councilwoman Mayfield has been doing as well, is engaging people, having the conversation, but then doing the work. I think we got a lot of words. We just need a lot more workers to jump on board and change these outcomes.
And that November 15th event is going to be a tremendous event. We're going to talk a lot about that as this segment develops. Ms. Mayfield, looking back now in hindsight, anything you would have done differently in the way that you managed this? I know that, the media.
Have you met her? Have you met her?
Exactly.
Well, I know that we live in a soundbite society, and we want it quick and we want it fast. And, this is an opportunity, obviously, unfiltered, to have your say and explain clearly what you were trying to articulate then. Anything you would have done differently looking back?
So, to be perfectly honest, no. What I would have liked for the community and what I want my officers to know is that I have always been, long before running for office in 2011, and I continue to be one of the strongest supporters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. But that doesn't mean I'm going to turn a blind eye to situations that are happening and individuals who do not deserve to wear our badge, our uniform, or have a gun placed in their care. I think it was very disingenuous, the fact that a post that I shared 3 months prior, during the time that we were having conversations of potential increases for law enforcement and thinking about the salaries and the benefits for law enforcement for an individual, to then go and pull that particular tweet when I send out a lot of comments. Because, again, I can't hold on to all this pain. It's not who I am, because I take my work and my service to community very seriously. So in these 7 years, there are plenty of nights that I'm up, I'm sure, like our chief, till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, thinking of the impact of how we govern. The decision that I, along with 5 of my colleagues, make set precedent and policy. How effective are we and am I in helping those who are most in need? So if I'm hurting and I'm recognizing this, I feel like it is also part of my responsibility as an elected official to address it. Because too often you don't have elected officials that see pain all around them in the community, whether it's our specific community or the community abroad. They don't address it.
Some would argue, though, that you also have a larger responsibility as an elected official to measure your words, that words mean things. And as far as hurt goes, there was a lot of hurt on the other side, too. I talked, as I'm sure you have, with a number of officers over the last several months who said that they felt as though you were, painting everyone with a broad brush, and really made it difficult, their positions even more difficult, to make those connections in these African-American communities, build that trust.
You read that.
Yeah.
Where
I wrote
in
it.
There,
I wrote it.
Where in there did I stay on?
Yeah.
So to me, it's one of those things where if the shoe doesn't fit, why are you trying to force it? I don't need you to make excuses. It's the same thing as if we were back in grade school and you see that bully being a bully. You have 2 choices. You can either stand by and say nothing and then you are complicit, or you can step in to say that that's not Okay. The fact that individuals were upset about me addressing the issue, opposed to being upset about the issue, that is one of our biggest disconnects in community and in society, which is why it's so important for people to listen to this conversation that we're having and know that read what I write, opposed to jumping in with your conclusion and your bias. Why would you get defensive on it? It's the same thing as in a rap song. If you call out women in a derogatory way in a rap song, I'm not going to take offense to that because you're not talking to me. I may choose to turn the station. I may choose not to buy your records or support your concert, but you're not talking to me when you're having this conversation and you're lumping people. I think it was very sad that individuals took that on as a personal attack opposed to hearing what I was really saying, and that is we have amazing officers out there, but those amazing officers, those good officers, those that go 120 beyond, you are in jeopardy every time that bad one is out there because the impact of that bad one is now painting a different picture. I didn't paint that broad picture.
I don't think you disagree there.
No,
with
no,
that,
no. I told you when she started talking to me again, when we first had a conversation, we saw that there's some common ground there. I'm passionate about that. I am. At the same time, though, what I struggled with personally, because I'm an emotional person too, there was no debating that, is there were opportunities to qualify, and I think, true to Miss Mayfield's personality, she didn't, because she felt like you should read the context. And a lot of our people read the specific words. And they took those words, because they don't have a history with her, to heart. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think that's immature. I just think that's human. But what I want to do now is see where this leads us.
And it's hard to pull that context out
of
of 240 characters or less, I guess.
140, yeah.
Yeah, right, or 280 now. I think it is with Twitter, right? So,
but you said something about the responsibility of my role. As a community, are we demanding that 45, who's in the highest office in the land, be responsible with their words? And their words hurt a lot more people than people being upset about me trying to figure out how can I better serve my community. First of all, we have to address it. There's pain. We had the events in 2016 because as a community, we do not like to address the hard conversations. That was not the first time. That's not going to necessarily be the last, but moving forward, can we do a better job of having real communication? But at first you have to acknowledge the pain. You have to acknowledge the symptom before you can do any work towards healing. But the expectation that, one, I'm not supposed to have an opinion.
right.
Because
And we talked about this
freedom
prior
of
to the
speech.
program, right?
I
and,
lose
and you,
that.
And you, well, let's talk about the elephant in the room too, because you and I, full disclosure, we talked about this before the program. You seem to believe, and you're steadfast in the fact that you believe it's because of your race and you believe it's because of your gender.
Definitely. There is a clear, narrow box that media, that reporters like to put women in specifically, and add on top of that an African-American female. So one of the examples that I gave, Chief, was years ago I was questioning one of many petitions that were coming before council. And the way it was written in the local paper the next day is Councilmember LaWanna Mayfield, Democrat, African-American, LGBT, berates staff. My colleague at the time next to me, Kenny Smith, asked questions. Councilmember, later on, like a sentence or so later, Councilmember Kenny Smith, Republican, questions staff spending. So when you're constantly receiving, because like most people, I receive Google alerts. So when I'm constantly looking at statements or headlines that always want to make it as a negative, but if my male counterpart asks a similar or really mansplains and asks the exact same question that I ask, then that's going to make you step back and wonder, okay, is it really about addressing the issue and questioning how we are spending public dollars? Or is it about your headline? And if it's about the headline, then it's a courtesy that I have an interview with reporters, because I can go to social media live and make a comment on Twitter. Because trust me, I have said a lot worse things on Twitter. So it's interesting the things that make their way to the media.
Well, that really begs the question then, is it the media's job to make elected officials look good, or is it elected officials' job to make themselves look good?
I think it's the media's job to report the facts. And we have gotten away from reporting the facts. If you think about it, there is very little interviewing and research done today. Whatever is catchy, then you just see that regurgitated. I could see my name in 20 different articles, but I never had a conversation with any of those reporters. Yeah. So when you're in a environment where we, the consumers, want quick, fast information, we are in this social media space where we want as many likes and clicks, and if your job is determined on how many clicks, to a certain extent, I can understand taking shortcuts. But the other side of that is, as an elected official, as a public servant, as someone who has worked in this community for many years, who lives in this community, who pays taxes in this community, I would hope that people understand that it is my job to question. But I also hope that people remember that we're human. I don't put that aside because of this part-time job that I raise my hand and say, I will do this work. Because that's the other thing that people don't realize. This is a part-time job that I love to share with my close friends. This is a full-time, part-time pay job because this is not part-time, because Chief and I see each other on Saturdays, on Sundays, 8 o'clock at night, 7 in the morning, out trying to be of service. So why is there an expectation that I'm not supposed to share my thoughts and or share what's going on to try to get a broader conversation?
Let me say this too. I think we're constantly struggling to get people to be genuine and to truthfully. I'm seriously, and it takes sometimes some challenges to knock you down and to reorient so that you do that. I think though, what's interesting is, we talk all over the city. I go to churches, I go to Rotary clubs and everything else. We talk independently about some of the most in-depth conversations around race and privilege and everything else. And then when we get together, it all stops. And my struggle is, the whole reason we do Straight Talk anyway is because I want you to see in full context everything I'm saying. Take it, leave it, like it, not. It's up to you. But for once, I get to talk directly to people who want to hear what I'm thinking about, how I feel on things, and I can directly respond without somebody else adjusting my message. I own everything I say, and every syllable comes out of my mouth. I sometimes have to walk them back. That's okay too. I'm still my mom and dad's son. But at the end of the day, I want people to really be genuine in this conversation, because in a couple of years, we're going to be challenged. We're going to be challenged by a lot of external forces that really want to come in and hijack everything that we're about at Charlotte-Mecklenburg. So if we don't get our house in order prior to then, shame on us, and we deserve everything we get. So that's why I think these kind of conversations are essential. But if you're not going to be genuine, then you're going to be lip service. Somebody else gets to tell your story.
Yeah.
But Chief, you have the luxury of being genuine because you're still male.
Sure.
And when you add, let's just step back and read the comments, listen to the interviews that I've done over the years. Close your eyes and make me a male. Would there be as much offense to a lot of it? Because I haven't said anything that others haven't addressed. Where I would say that one of my biggest challenges is I take conversations that I would have with friends when we're sitting around talking about what's going on in the community. Because, at the barbershop and when you're out with your friends and you have a social time, you solve all the problems of the world. I then take those conversations and put them into the atmosphere of the World Wide Web. So it's not like they're these unrealistic conversations. These are conversations that we're having. So I will pose a number of times the thought, tell me what you think about this. How do you feel about this? Because one, I want you to be engaged, but also I want you to be educated. But that's why it feels for me that because I'm female and because I'm African American, how dare I address or even consider paying attention to what is going on in the community, whether it is the working poor, the chronically unemployed, those formerly incarcerated trying to get their life back together, small business owners, black and white community. How dare I address anything but talk about all the good? Because that's what government's supposed to do. We're only supposed to highlight everything good that's going on.
And I think that's a really good point. So let's, before we turn the page on that, because there's a lot of territory we want to cover, not the least of which is 2020, that party that we have coming up in 2020.
Yeah.
Some could see it as a party, others are going to see it as nothing short of a burden, and we can get into that in just a little bit. But close the book on this. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, if you had a message for the rank and file of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, you'd say what exactly?
I would tell you that I have been and I will continue to be a major supporter of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. But I am going to also, even though I would not do things differently, I am going to own the fact that moving forward, and I hope I've been doing that since we've had the community conversations, is think about how to better support you. So now that the attention has been brought, because there's a time where, to me, it's not controversy. To me, it's being genuine and addressing the issue. But now that that first layer of dead skin has been ripped off, let's have a real conversation, because I need you to know that I do support you all. But I'm also not going to turn a blind eye to those who are disrespecting our badge, disrespecting our chief, disrespecting their colleagues, because we have a board when it has been determined that you are not a good officer, and that board has the authority to say, well, you need to figure out some place to put them. You're undermining. And I don't expect the chief to have that conversation. Sure. As the elected official, that is part of my job, is to highlight, because I want you to have all the support that you need to be successful. But if you have officers that you know have done things that are against our personal code, and you attempt to remove them, and those officers are then through a process that's long, that's older than any of us sitting around this table, says that no, they get to keep their job, that is now creating a undercurrent environment. I am going to address. I am going to call you out. I am going to do everything that is in my ability, and I am going to work with my colleagues to get policy done through the General Assembly to ensure that our CMPD is protected, and we only have the best of the best that recognize protect and serve is for everyone, and it is not a selective or a subjective idea.
I think the overwhelming majority of the department would agree with you to the syllable. In fact, would you be surprised, some may be surprised, that of the 103 complaints on officers this year, 85 of those complaints were lodged by CMPD officers themselves. What does that tell you, Chief?
Well, it speaks to the culture. It does. It speaks to the fact that, and Ms. Mayfield spoke to it, the vast majority of people do great work. They go above and beyond. We do have some who choose otherwise. Listen, I didn't come here to be liked by anybody. And I know you say gender has privileges, and I don't disagree fully. But what I'll say is everybody can find a reason to disagree and to not like you based on how you look, how you were made, and everything else. And that's okay, because I'm not doing it for the people who are cheering for you and giving you standing ovations, or those who are flipping you the bird. I'm doing it for everything that got us here. There was a price paid to get us here right now, along the way. And I'd be embarrassing my family. It'd be an affront to my parents if I did otherwise, meaning we hit it head on. We have the conversation about race. We have conversations, and I might say something that offends you. And that's okay. It's not my intent to be offensive, but it is my intent to get a very important message out and to engage in this work prior to us having somebody hijack and write the narrative for us. So I just say we got to be genuine. We can make mistakes. I acknowledge, I accept, I try to fix it, and then I move forward. But what we can't do is allow the fear of being perceived a certain way, a fear of being a bigot, a fear of being a racist, fear of being just a mean old black man or whatever it is, and not engage at all in the conversation that I think could help us heal, could get us a strong ground game. So when we host this big event, we're ready and we celebrate our city, and we will have made some progress towards healing in a way that we haven't before, because we like to get back to business. This is not a get back to business kind of topic.
Last question.
I agree with you 100%.
Ms. Mayfield, some had suggested that maybe you were using this as an opportunity to keep your name in the headlines because you have larger, bigger political aspirations, maybe running for Congress, maybe Congressman Adams' position there.
First of all, I love and respect Congresswoman Adams and anything that I can do to support her, because what I see is someone doing the work. I see someone who has gained a level of higher office and not forgotten that it's about the people. So I respect that immensely. She is definitely one of my personal sheroes. It's not about trying to go to Congress. It is honestly about being genuine to the community organizer from more than 25, 30 years ago that was crazy enough to decide to run for office. I cannot not address issues when God has given me a platform to do just that. I am not a rubber stamp status quo individual, and I have not been. So if you go back the 7 years, I have been very consistent about the issues in the community that I have addressed and that I have worked on. I think if we had more transparency in this whole political realm, then I wouldn't seem like the anomaly. And therefore, people don't know what to do with my comments, because I don't work for a company that's going to benefit off of me being in office. So I'm not an attorney that has a chance to see what's coming down the pike in order to make investments. I'm not a developer or have a company that's going to directly benefit off of knowing what development is coming in the next 5 or 10 years. I am here clearly to be of service to my community, but I also understand I'm not going to make everybody happy. And if I haven't pissed you off yet, give me time. It will happen. Because if you agree with everything that anyone does, I just need y'all to know that's the beginnings of a cult. I'm not interested in having the cult of Lawana, but I am interested in being of service, and I am working to try to be a little more gentler and a little more kinder, but I'm not going to stop addressing the issues, and it's not about higher office. It's about service. So if I run for something else, community, y'all decide. You either come out and vote for me and I move to the next level, or you don't. My service isn't tied to this title. But what I am proud of is I get to walk away and say, I gave y'all a hell of a great 8 years of development and work, and I stayed true to myself. And I stayed true to my beliefs, and God and I have conversations daily on if I need to do this differently, help me find another way to do it so that your work is seen, and remove me out of it so that I can be a better servant.
RNC 2020. I
Yeah,
know
I voted no.
You're just thrilled about this, right? I can barely contain yourself, right? Just over the top, just gushing about this opportunity that we're going to have here in Charlotte. What are your thoughts there?
I was very clear on the beginning with not supporting the RNC, and it has nothing to do with the RNC, because Charlotte did a outstanding job with hosting the DNC. So honestly, if it was any other person in the White House, if it was any other administration besides this administration that daily attacks women, attacks immigrants, attacks minorities, attacks our constitutional system, that has disrespected every norm of every preceding candidate for the highest office and every president, with not providing your tax forms, staying at your personal hotels for all your business, using tax dollars to continue to make you and your family wealthy, appointing family members in some of the highest positions and in rooms where you're making negotiating decisions on behalf of the nation, but your personal business is financially benefiting, but the nation, our farmers, our workers, are struggling every day, and the level of discourse. You have 100,000 plus people show up and protest just for his everyday comments.
Fair to say he won't be getting a campaign contribution from Miss Mayfield. Chief,
No.
Chief, in your position, you've got to remain apolitical.
Sure.
Politics aside, this is going to be an undertaking moving ahead to 2020.
Yeah, let me go back for a second. I will not be running for office either. Let me just put that out there. Well, yeah, here's the deal, though. I've seen us as a city at our worst. So I've also seen us at our best. I just think we got to get the work done. We got to start having these conversations and then moving towards some level of unity in our city before we do anything large again. Everybody's jumping to the RNC, and I know that's coming to us, and it's a big convention. But we have the NBA All-Star, which is another international event coming in February that we have to be prepared for. So I'm not going to get much sleep, engaging a lot of people who want to have conversations and debates. But at the end of the day, I think our city is worth it. Here's the other piece, though. I want to go back to something that we talked about before. And it's a message that I wish I could get kids who look like me to understand. And that is we do have a lot of good officers. But as a community, we hold all of us accountable. And I keep saying the time to handle your disagreement or your case with an officer is not at a traffic stop on the side of the street. Get your day in court. Don't give anybody the opportunity. We're about to do some work around revising our whole use of force policy. And the point is, it's illegal for somebody to touch you, an officer to touch you or use force against you. It's illegal unless you're resisting. So what I say is we got to use information, facts, knowledge to our benefit. There's no reason to try to settle that situation on the side of the road or at a traffic stop or anywhere else when you have the benefit of having the law protect you, even against people who are sworn to do so. So I just think we got to use this good information for better outcomes.
I saw that you had you reacted there. What are your thoughts there?
What we have written, there are a lot of laws that are in place. One of the biggest challenges is too often we're not living to get our day in court. I personally have a challenge that we're telling young black boys and girls that you need to have your hands up on the wheel. Because white children aren't having those conversations with their parents.
Well, I'm having those conversations with my daughters.
I'm glad you are, but I have had too many conversations with, and believe it or not, since for whatever reason people think I don't have any white friends, but believe it or not, I do. And we have these conversations, and they're like, oh my goodness, I never had that conversation. My parents didn't talk to me about it. I didn't know we don't have to talk about it. So if you have a little white child playing with a water gun, and you have a black child playing with a water gun, and they're out in the park, and that white child is approached, and hey, what are you doing? But that black child is approached with guns drawn, you're in a state of fear. So when we say there are certain things that as a black male or female that you should do in order to try to make it home safely, but in white America, you can literally get into a physical altercation with an officer. So what was it, like 4 months ago? It wasn't in Charlotte. A female officer got in an altercation with a woman who was highly intoxicated. They're struggling. The intoxicated female, one tried to run over the officer. They get the car stopped. They're physically struggling. The intoxicated woman wrapped her hands up in the female officer's hair to the point where they literally had to cut off the officer's hair. She was arrested. If I'm in the vehicle as a black female or as a young black male or older black male, and you're telling me I have to have my hands on the wheel so that you can see everything that's going on, but at the exact same time, this physical altercation is happening and you're able to be arrested, and I'm sitting in my car and that ends in me being shot multiple times because of your fear, it's not even about training. That is a bigger conversation that we're not having. We were talking offline. Emmett Till died because a white woman lied. Last week, we had a child walking through the store with a backpack on. his backpack brushed against this white woman.
I saw it.
She lied and said this child assaulted her. That young man is Emmett Till. So when we've created this space, there was a time where if you file a false police report, you're supposed to be arrested. But white people are picking, especially white women right now, are picking up the phone left and right for black people living while black. I can't go to a cookout. I can't go into my own home without a white woman questioning me about whether I live in the building that I live in. But you're not arrested. So when we're having that conversation, and it appears to the community that these white people then go off after you've created all this chaos and wreaked all this havoc, you just get to go on with your day. That's a problem.
I don't disagree. And to your point, I think that is exactly the conversation we need to have. Because here's the deal. What I'm talking about is how do you get through a traffic stop or an engagement with an officer? Because what I'm tired of doing in the middle of the night is getting up, seeing people who've been injured or shot by officers because there was a level of resistance and a perceived threat. What I'm trying to do is get ahead of that. It's kind of hard now to say you were threatened and you really want on body-worn camera. That's a $7.2 million investment that I'm glad you made. But what I do see is the vast majority of our people are doing it right. I want to have that opportunity to hold accountable those who don't. And I think we're quick to jump to situations that do bear out what we're looking for. What I see normally is officers who are going to treat everybody the way they should be treated. I'm not going to say we have that 100%. I don't think the human nature would allow for that. But I do think the conversation about bias is a good conversation to have. I do think everybody should be able to acknowledge that they have it. What I got to do is keep our people from acting on it. That's why we put so much into the curriculum that we give all of our people. But ultimately, what I tell my family is, I want you here. I want you alive. I do. And if it's a different message that other ethnicities are talking to their kids about, that's their business. My family is my business. And that's how I feel about this community. I want people to be able to get through that encounter and then give us the opportunity to hold them accountable if they've done something wrong.
Ms. Mayfield, do you believe the overwhelming majority of officers with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department are doing the right thing?
Absolutely. It was never a question for me for those that's doing good. We highlight them. We have the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Community Awards that I have been a part of for more than 12, 13 years. So we highlight those. But again, for me, I can't overlook those who don't. When I have a resident in the Wilmore neighborhood, but as the community started to transition and we became more diverse, when I have a young white couple that move in, they have a break-in. Break-ins happen all over the city. But when an officer shows up and says to them, one, because you're speaking man to man, well, what did you expect moving over here? Or then, well, I wouldn't move my wife and kids over here. That is not the experience that I've had with CMPD and that a lot of others have not had. But for those who've had those experiences, that now creates a new narrative of how you move forward. When there, of which I am thankful because we do have amazing officers, there was a break-in Hidden Valley, because Hidden Valley is also changing. Mm-hmm. You had a young African-American couple that made a major investment because they wanted to live and raise their children in their community. Unfortunately, while they were out, there was a break-in. The break-in happened on the backside of the home. They had an alarm. Law enforcement went out. They did not get out their vehicle. They drove by the front, rolled it up, and closed it as nothing. The people arrived home, saw all the damage from the break-in, had to call the police back out. They had to go then through the process to start an investigation. Give me consistency. That officer, whatever their bias is, you don't need to be working in certain communities. Because again, for all the great officers that are out there that recognize that they want to do their job and do it to the best of their ability, these one-offs, there's enough one-offs where we should be able to identify you, and if we cannot remove you from law enforcement, then you need to be the one that's monitoring the schools. You need to be the one that's sitting on the side doing nothing but paperwork. You don't need to have interaction with the community at all, because whatever your bias is, I'm not seeing you as an individual because of where you live, and you're not seeing me as an individual because of who you think I am and where I live.
Sure. Here's what I'll tell you, and I spoke to it before. We all have a responsibility to hold all of our people accountable, every one of them. So the one-offs should not be somebody that I hear about in a conversation. It should be a formal complaint showing this is what happened, so that Internal Affairs can investigate it. And 80% of the time, when we get those complaints, it's our own people policing themselves, because we don't want to tolerate that behavior either. Because now we know we've painted a whole profession, a department and a profession, a certain way that is not the essence of who we really are. So I say accountability, and that's what I'm going to continue to preach, even if people don't want to hear it.
And we have amazing officers, and I'm not going to discount that. That's why I say I take full responsibility of, as I move forward, trying to figure out a way where those that are doing the right thing, you're not wearing the comments that I'm addressing to those that aren't, because it's not your cloak to wear. But you should want someone that's in a policy-making position that's fighting to help you have everything that you need and keep you safe and keep you empowered and keep you in a space and a part of a system that's going to reward and uplift and protect you. You should want to have elected officials doing that.
You know, elected officials, I think you'd agree. I know you have a tremendous following with your constituency on social media and the community. You know, some would argue that, there's a great opportunity for you here when we're on the subject of disproportionality. There's a disproportionate number of African American, especially young men, that are being killed in our community senselessly at the hands of other African American men. So where are you on those issues?
So I'm there. I speak to those as well. Unfortunately, those are not the articles that's picked up by the media and then become a widespread conversation, because I'm always commenting on that as well. There is a study that came out within the last year and a half that to me, it scratched the surface on the DNA impact of slavery. And when you look at the high concentration of poverty, when you look at the creation of the big deal after the GI Bill, and who had access to housing, and who had access to gain wealth and build wealth, and you look at the housing crisis right now, if you don't see better, there's a small percentage that is something inside you that makes you want to do better, because you know that God has a greater plan for you. But if what you see around you daily is a negative, a lot of people don't know how to disassociate from that. I have conversations all the time. I send on Facebook sharing comments. I tweet out all the time that as a community, we need to gain responsibility and remember who we are as a people. And when I say who we are, thinking about the reality that African Americans have always been entrepreneurs. We have always been business leaders. We have always been creative. You're still learning in 2018 items that it was actually African American created that others were given credit to. There's a disconnect when we look at our school system, housing, and job opportunity. So with all the work that CMPD is doing with our young people, we're changing lives. Young people are being pulled out of certain situations and introduced to new ones. But at the same time, a lot of them are making a conscious decision. And I put that onus on the parents. You know your child doesn't have a job. You know your child didn't go to school past the 9th or 10th grade, but yet all the bills are being paid in the house by that child.
How's that happening?
Let's have a real conversation. Mm-hmm. So there's a commitment that we need to have in our own, a conversation we need to have in our own community. But on top of that, what I don't need is law enforcement contributing. And it's not an either or. Well, because why are you only talking about this? No, I'm talking about all of it. The question is, why is the media only picking up this part? Why are we not talking about what's going on in our own community? Why are we not talking about I was speaking with a judge yesterday. You have a case where you have a young man, y'all started on the right track, you and your wife, as far as education. Life happened. One of you became ill. Well, you have one child, your job's not making enough. What do? What is the quickest way to make money? You obviously, criminal activity was not a good career path for you because you were not good at it, because you were caught almost immediately. So now you're starting this process and you're going down this path where now you have a record, which is going to make it even harder for you to find a quality job and change the narrative. Then add on top of that, you may have another child coming in. You were struggling with one. We have to make better decisions in our life, but that is not a but. That is an and. How do we address this? It's not an either or. Well, if black folks stop killing each other, okay, that's real. We need to have those conversations, but that has nothing to do with this conversation.
Chief, sure. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. Some of the loss that we see year after year, senseless. Oftentimes involves young people. Oftentimes it involves, drugs and other high-risk behavior that they're engaged in. Miss Mayfield's point, it's a conversation. It's got to start at home.
The conversation is a good start, but then you got to do the work. I think probably some of the things I take the most pride in, comfort in, are those programs that we have that really take a kid who's made his first mistake or her first mistake and teach them the responsibility that they have for themselves and what they can actually do if they focus and put their talents and attention other ways. And then they graduate and they become very, very successful people. Some of whom are, the story you just told, it's not either or. It's not. But a lot of times we're the catalyst. We're the connection. We see people at their worst and when they're most dealing with trauma. And the Community Policing Crisis Response Team, the CPCRT that we're looking to bring, helps deal with the trauma and proactively. But what we do is we give people hope, we give them opportunity, give them some skills, they can get employed, they can start supporting their family. Those are the things that never go viral. Those are the stories that, right. Those are the stories that never really get told. Those are reasons I say you need to friend us too, so we can give you some different information, so you can have a fuller picture of what we try to do as a profession. But ultimately, that doesn't mean we can't be held accountable, nor does that mean we shouldn't be held accountable. We absolutely should. And I carry a big stick for a reason.
And I can attest to that. For good reason. We're winding down, and this could go on for hours, and probably should, longer than hours, right? Days and days and days. Because it's that important. Chief, we started in earnest last week with the community, a big push over the next several months that's going to lead into the RNC, beyond the RNC, these important conversations, bridging the difference. Have a big event coming up on November 15th at Johnson C. Smith University. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what the vision is, what the expectations are.
Sure. I alluded to it just briefly earlier. We have these conversations with everybody except Councilwoman Mayfield in our own areas that we're most comfortable. Meaning I'll go talk to a black church and I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak. I'll go to Rotary or Hood Hog at Breakfast and I'm preaching to a different group. We'll want to bring these groups together to have these kinds of conversations and debates. You got a position, defend it, but also have a little space that people might be able to change your mind a bit. It does matter. We can talk about privilege and bias and everything else that people run from, but it's an opportunity too that's what I call the ground game, to really see what we have in common. It's not an easy conversation because we don't have the best history. It's a lot in the ground here in Charlotte, as Bishop Alexander likes to say. We got to unearth it, deal with it, and then move forward. The only way to do that, though, is to start with these courageous conversations. You said it'll be going on into 2020 and beyond. Absolutely right. It'll be with somebody else pushing it, but that's exactly the plan, and that's exactly the foundation we're looking to do when we bridge the difference.
And we'll make that link available for anyone who is interested in participating in that event on November 15th. I will say straight out of the gate, it's going to be a hot ticket. There's only about 150 seats available for that event, so probably a smart idea to start looking into that immediately, and we'll put that down at the bottom of this. I will also say this, despite all of the swirl around Miss Mayfield's remarks, she was the one that prompted this conversation. She wasn't hiding. She was more than willing and capable of getting out there to discuss it. Lover, hater, indifferent, regardless, she was the one who prompted this conversation. So you got to get some credit for that at the very least, Ms.
I
Mayfield.
appreciate the fact that we were able to have this conversation, because I also, not only do I want all of our officers to understand, I want the community to understand. There is not a rift or discourse between me and Chief Putney. So
We fight a lot.
we fight a lot, but that's like brother and sisters. We were fighting before. So this is a real conversation that needs to happen. Chief has been having the conversation his way. I am a lot more direct, and I feel like the platform that I have allows me to do it, because there is a conversation that we're having in the city around how do we govern using a racial equity lens. How do we look at racial equity and bias when we're looking at policy making? How do we change that conversation? Because everything is relational. So if I'm an executive of an organization and we're having a conversation, and you mentioned that your small child is looking to get into one of the top charter schools, and I happen to be on the board, the chances are greater that your child is going to get a second look because of our relationship than it is with them just trying to go into the lottery. That's the reality of Charlotte. Charlotte is very relational. The question is, how many people of differing socioeconomic backgrounds are in those rooms to even build those relationships?
Sure. I think, too, the big piece of it is access. And what I hear when I go to Rotary is people want to help, and they want to help those who need it most. So when all the talking's done, it's time to start having people be true to their words and give that access, give those opportunities. We got privately funded Envision Academy because this community said, I want to give people a second chance. Yeah. They wouldn't qualify for MyEP, many of them, but they had the opportunity to go through something else that people said, Hugh McCall and B of A in particular said, I'm gonna show you, I'll put my money where my mouth is. And that's gonna be when all the words are done. That's the kind of work we're looking forward to.
And then I ask for you to do more. I ask for you to not only write that check, but I ask for you to show up. Yeah. I ask for you to be in that room for us to have this hard conversation.
Love it.
Let us break bread together. Let us drink. It's interesting how when I'm in a space and people think they know who I am, and they're like, I think that's her. And you can tell in everything in their body language that they're ready, they're set on whatever opinion they've formed of me based on the internet and the media. And then we'll have a conversation talking about politics, talking about life, talking about background, talking about whatever. And you can physically watch that whole shield that they put up drop off. And they're like, you are not what I thought. We have to get to more of those places, and I am thankful that Chief is leading that conversation through CMPD and with the community. But for those that write a check, I'm asking you to show up and be a part of it as well. If you live in Providence and you work uptown, I need you to do more than just drive up Providence Road to get to work and back. I need you to recognize that we have a very diverse city all around us. Let's get out into it and get to know your neighbors.
And, a good first step. Did you have something else, Chief?
No, I didn't.
A good first step, I think, is making that engagement on November 15th. Being there, being present, engaging in the conversation. And sure, we could all write a check a box, put our heads on the pillow, and feel good about ourselves. But I think we'd all agree it goes a lot further than that. Look for that information, that link on the bottom of this post. We look forward to seeing at least 150 of you out there on November 15th.
149, because I have my ticket.
149. Miss Mayfield is committed to being there, as well as a number of other elected officials. Important conversations, and look for that on November 15th. Look for more Straight Talks with Chief Putney, and who knows who will be in the chair next go around.
A couple of names are surfacing, I think.
Right, names are starting to come to light, and I think it's an exciting time to be involved in these conversations. I want to thank you both. I know how busy you are.
Thank you.
I am honored. Thank you. Oh, wait, so that we know, because it didn't work prior to
There you go.
rocking my CMPD hat,
That's good on
because I do love you all and will always love you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Till next go round.